We need to rethink the idea that in order to do good marketing, we don't need more data. What we need is better data. And in order to do that, we need to build that trust relationship with those prospect customers at the right time. The brands that are able to demonstrate that they care about the data they collect and their customers, they are the ones who are going to win. There's still no magic. It's not number of tools and widgets that you include in your MarTech stack that will make the difference. It's how you really care about your customers. Don't be afraid of disclosing what you're doing in a language that makes sense. Not necessarily in the legal terminology, but a language that your customers are going to understand. If you're ashamed of your marketing tactics going public, it's not a good marketing tactic.
Hi, this is Loris Morini, and you're listening to the Discovering Data podcast. We're here because we want to take responsibility for how data influences the world, and we want to enable individuals on our teams to achieve their highest potential. This show is for you if you want to understand the industry, find your tribe, and accelerate your growth. We bring you conversations with thought and practice leaders from all over the world and create opportunities to connect and to learn as a community. Our new home is at discoveringdata.com, where you'll find a forum to connect with data leaders like you, episode transcripts, best quotes, and other material that can help you learn and apply your knowledge at work. If you have any feedback or ideas you'd like to share, please reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or Twitter. And now join me for this new episode. Let's stay curious and keep discovering data. Those that follow me know that we touched many topics in the last 30x episodes, but we rarely talked about ethics, privacy. And part of the reason is, imposter syndrome. I didn't feel I knew enough to have a meaningful conversation on the topic. Spoiler alert, I still feel that way. But the second reason is because to be honest, I never found, someone that could weigh in on the topic, someone with the right experience. But what I was hoping to achieve with this one is, my guest and I hoping to achieve with this is to really zoom into that moment where ethics and privacy conversations meet the practical business needs. So marketing is the focus today, but it's not just marketing. It's about how do we ethically use data assets to improve the key performance indicators we track in marketing and to help the business as a whole. And do it in a way that is respectful of people's data and people's privacy. So my guest today is Stéphane Hamel. Stéphane is a seasoned independent consultant, distinguished thought leader in the field of digital marketing and analytics. He advises global clients, agencies, startups, and vendors in the digital analytics space on the ethical use of data and how to grow a data-informed culture. And right now, he's interested in the ethical use of data for marketing purposes. He's teaching marketing and analytics to MBA students, as well as he's an investor and advisor to a number of privacy tech startups. So he's got really that view on what's happening, what's hot in the industry right now. Stéphane, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm always delighted to share my thoughts and experience and the way I see things in this field.
Awesome. Let's start with from the basics. Give me your intro to the world of privacy ethics and what has happened in the last 15, 20 years.
My initial background was in software engineering. So back in 1987, I have gray hair, so that's why. In 1987, my internship was all about using healthcare data to do analysis of the different cares and stuff that were being offered to the patients in hospitals. And even at the time, we had very strict rules about what we could do with data or not. And even if the names and the age and gender and all kinds of attributes were available, and we had on Monday at 3 p.m., this person had, this person had a bath, for example. Even if we had all of that information, we had very strict rules about what we could do or not do in that research project. So I I think someone who's grown with a computer science or a data science background will appreciate that. But over the years, what happened is when the web came out, the natural thing that happened is a replication of what was known in the marketing uh, environment. So the media model, the advertising model of the papers and TV and radio by default was transposed to the web. So naturally what happened is we started to see some banners, we started to see some advertising on the web, and the model was the one from papers and TV where you get to view some ads in order to get something for free, which is the content that you want. And that's what eventually led us to where we stand today, where the whole economy of the web and probably the internet itself stems from that idea that in order to get something you need to see some ads and you need to sacrifice some data, except that the data becomes so easy to collect, so easy to store, it's very cheap, you can collect so much information that then it erodes the notion of privacy. And what is privacy? The simplest way to see it is what I, as an individual, I decide to share or not, what I want to protect, because I feel that it's a little piece of information I don't want to share. It's not for others to decide what is your privacy. It's up to each individual to decide what they want to keep to themselves, or if they are willing to say, okay, let's tell the world that I have such and such attributes. So it's very, very personal.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because inside that right that you spoke about, there's at least perhaps two elements. One is to have people able to see which of their information that they put out there is used.
Mm-hmm.
And so one is visibility, and the other one, at least, is be able to control it. To be able to have toggles that you can say, I don't want this, this, and this to be used. Diving into that gut feeling that I had, and trying to build a more solid foundation to understand what are the legal, actual implications for this, like for the business.
There's really two ways to see it, and of course we hear a lot about privacy or data protection, I should say, depending on, in Europe, there's more emphasis on data protection. In North America, there's more emphasis on the word privacy. But at the end of the day, if you take it from a legal angle for the business, it's all about risk mitigation. It's how can I make sure that I'm compliant to the GDPR and e-privacy and all those aspects. So what you think about is, what do I need to do? Where's the list of what I need to do so that I don't get into any trouble as a brand? So then you go, oh, I need to ask for consent. Oh, I need to ask for cookies, and I need to do this and name a DPO and all that stuff. So it's all about risk mitigation for the business. But as marketers, we like to say that we are customer centric, because we want to build trust with our customers.
Yes.
That's all about marketing, right? It's about building the trust so the customers understand what is your value proposition, and they embrace it, and they say, oh, I like you so much, I'm going to buy your product or subscribe to your service, and so on. So when you take a more ethical approach to it, what you constantly ask yourself is exactly what you said earlier, is, am I doing the right thing for my customers? If I was in the shoes of my customers, would I appreciate what the brand is doing for me? Or would I say, oh, wait a minute, why do you ask for my birthday when you don't need it? That's a funny one, because how many times you go on a website and you need to fill all kind of information just to get a supposedly white paper, which in reality is going to be just a marketing piece.
Yeah.
There's no research, there's no scientific background. It's really just it's called it's called a white paper because it sounds better,
Yeah.
but it's just a marketing piece. And we know perfectly well they are asking all of those informations because they want to get our contact. They want to know who we are. But
Mm,
I'm sorry, but if you want me to read your marketing piece, give it to me. And if I like it, I will know how to reach you and
yeah,
I will
definitely.
be a much better prospect. Instead, what we do, I don't know if you do that, I do it all the time. We just fill crap in those forms. I'm
Yeah.
always nobody living nowhere. And my phone number is 1111111,
Yeah.
right? What's the marketing value of that? There is absolutely no value. So I think we need to rethink the idea that in order to do good
Mhm.
marketing, we absolutely need more data. We don't need more data. What we need is better data. And in order to do that, we need to build that trust relationship with those prospect customers at the right time. And
Mhm.
if they want to reach us, then yes, they will know how to do it. And we're going to be in a better position to serve them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I have that resonates with me. As you say, trust. I mean, it's such a simple human thing. We know how our real world relationships work. It's all about
Yeah,
being there for each other and demonstrating upfront,
exactly.
why one is supposed to talk to someone else.
The
So,
funny thing about ethics versus legal is a set of rules. You have to follow the rule, otherwise, you get in trouble. But ethics is about values, it's about personal values. And by extension, it's about brand value also. So when we interact with the brand, there needs to be a match between our personal values and the values exposed by the brand. And it's very personal and it's very cultural also because we see differences. Of course, on the legal standpoint, we see differences between the laws in the US and Europe and Canada and Australia and so on.
yeah,
There are big differences from a legal standpoint, but even from a cultural standpoint, our acceptance of some practice in marketing are very different. In the US, it's much more, I would say, relaxed, which is not necessarily a good thing. In Europe, it's more like it's stricter, and sometimes it's coming in the way of doing business. That's one thing I hear very often is, yeah, but if I'm really ethical and I do it in the right way, but all of my competitors are not doing it,
yeah,
I'm going to lose my edge. In the long run, I don't think so. Because
yeah.
again, it's a matter of values. And in the long run, the brands that are able to demonstrate that they care about the data they collect and their customers, they are the ones who are going to win, regardless of, okay, I'm following the law and I checked all the boxes and I'm fine. That's one thing. But the brand values related to ethics, that's something different.
So let's dive into the ideal state of privacy and ethics for you as someone that has that expertise. What should brands do in that
Mm-hmm.
regard? What would
Mm-hmm.
you? What's your expectation?
When you think about the GDPR, it's almost like the baseline of what we should be doing, right? It's all about transparency. Don't be afraid of disclosing what you're doing in a language that makes sense. Not necessarily in the legal terminology, but a language that your customers are going to understand. So, again, it's part of the value proposition. I hate when I see cookie banners that says we use cookies for this and that. Okay, but fine, I understand you have to do that. It's a pain in the but what's in it for me as the customer?
Hmm.
And where's the value proposition in there? So transparency, consent, control, super important. I want to have the control over what I want to give you or not. Um, Again, just this morning, I was filling out a form where it asked for my birthday and my zip code and things like that. And I was like, no. And my phone number, email. I was like, no, why do you need that? But all of those fields were required. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, screw that. I'm not doing it. I'm just moving on to your competitor who maybe is doing it right. So control, I think, is also super important. And if I go back to what I said earlier about the early days of the web, where the default, the model was, okay, we're going to show you ads, we're going to collect data, and you're going to get something for free. That's a value proposition, but we were really never asked about that. What if, imagine how the web would be today if from the start, each and every one of us would have had the control over the data we want to share with brands instead of brands deciding for us what they want to know from us, right? So if we were in control, that's zero party data that we hear a lot these days.
Yeah, fundamental keywords. I think you mentioned a few, but you said long term before, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that is something that everyone in data management struggles with, because we seem to be living in this world where all it matters is short-term goals, and
Yeah.
nobody seems to be looking at the horizon in 2, 3, 5, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we talk to the business about this? How do I demonstrate that we are still, there is a product market
Mm-hmm.
fit, and people want us? It can be a tricky thing to navigate.
One of the interesting aspects is we're moving from a world where the general idea was we're going to collect everything just in case we need it, right? And now it's because the party is over, the regulations are coming in and saying, okay, stop that. When you ask for a piece of data, you need to be able to demonstrate why you actually collected it and how you want to use it. Right? So I don't think it's a bad thing. And it's funny because I was so active in the digital analytics community for 20 years, advocating for digital analytics and so on. And now that I'm talking about privacy and ethics, people think that I'm against tracking, for example, or against data collection. But that's not the point. I'm not against it. To the contrary, I'm for it. But reimagine in a way that will be much more respectful, much more customer centric than what was done until now. So what how do you convince your managers that it's fine to ask for consent, and it's fine if only 30% of the people say, okay, yes, I agree, you can track me. So of course there's the legal aspect. If you don't do it, you can be fined. Usually that's a pretty strong incentive, right? But then there's the other aspect, which is what would be the cost of a data leak?
Mm.
Because obviously, if you collect more information, and these days, what we hear a lot is, oh, because of third-party cookies going, disappearing, and some people call it cookie apocalypse, and I laugh at that. Right? There's no apocalypse. You know what? I've been using Brave. My primary browser is Brave.
Mhm.
It blocks third-party cookies. Nothing exploded. I can still use the web. I can still navigate the internet. It still works. There's no apocalypse. Maybe those think there will be an apocalypse. Maybe they need to look at what they are doing, right? Because if it's so detrimental to what they are doing, maybe they're not doing the right thing. So there's the legal, there's the fines and all those aspects. Then there's the risk of a data leak. Obviously, if you collect more information, it gets riskier to have a data leak. And now we're talking about IT security and all those aspects. But what is the cost? What is the cost of a data leak? It can be super expensive. I read something like the average cost was 4 to 5 million, sometimes $9 million, depending obviously on the type of business and how big a data leak and so on. And on average, it was taking like almost a year, like 280 days to recover from a data leak. So that's another pretty strong incentive. And the third one is what is the cost in terms of brand value in the long run again. Uh, if a business has a data leak, how many customers are they going to lose? How many new customers they won't get because people will know, oh, wait a minute, this business, they had a data leak. I don't trust them anymore. And they will go to somewhere else. And maybe that somewhere else won't be any better. but
Mm.
but the point is that there's a cost to a bad reputation in terms of data management. And that cost oftentimes is really hard to quantify. But I read something like, was it 70% of people would abandon
70.
a brand if they don't trust how they use their data?
Well, I'm definitely in that cohort for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I have very little patience for that, mostly because I mean, this connects to the attention economy and the fact that we are overwhelmed with everything. Today, there's everything
Yes.
of everything. There's too much of
Mm-hmm.
everything. So the last thing we know we need is those automated marketing funnels. Shooting content that may not necessarily be useful to us. And
Well, again, we just have to think about how we do in our personal lives when we get an email once a year that says, "Oh, it's Black Friday. We really, really love you," and the rest of
yeah,
the year you don't hear about them, right?
zero.
Is
Yeah.
that building trust? Is that building the brand? Absolutely not. Maybe sometimes it's getting back to the basics of what is marketing. Marketing is not a chatbot that will be there. Oh, we really like you. You can talk to us, and you discover that the chatbot is actually crappy and doesn't understand anything. And when you try to actually reach someone, you're not able to do it. So tell me how the chatbot is really so miraculous that it will solve anything. So I'm not saying that it's not useful. What I'm saying is we need to be more careful because it's easy to implement, because
Mm.
it's machine learning or AI or smart about the data or whatever. There's still no magic. uh, it's not number of tools and widgets that you include in your martech stack that will make the difference. It's how you really care about your customers. And caring is not always automating. Sometimes yes, but not always.
Yeah, I love that. It's a realization for many, many, many people, especially looking at the state of digital marketing.
Mhm.
I was looking at an interesting report recently, which I actually should include in the show notes. And I'm actually wondering if anyone in the audience knows of a better report or not, or alternative reports. It's always good to double check with 2 or 3 data points. This one in
Mhm.
particular was talking about the effectiveness of advertising and digital advertising in particular, the return on investment, how
Mhm.
it's been steadily going down and down and down. Because yeah, you can come up with all the strategies you want, but we shouldn't forget that the other side is a human being, and we're very good at telling whether someone has genuine intentions or is
Mhm.
just trying to get that. I think they call it lead magnet, if I'm correct,
Yeah.
in the industry. To
Mhm.
really, like, yeah, I hate and love the term. I love it because it really explains what's happening. It's a magnet for
Mhm.
people
Yes.
to provide the details, and I hate it because, as you said, 90% of the time there's no real value behind it, and which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. Maybe we should dive into the tech for a moment before we
Mhm.
dive into the how to.
Mhm.
What are you seeing in the space in terms of privacy tech startups and players that are trying to
Mhm.
change the status quo?
Yeah, there's a lot of innovation going on that definitely, and part of that is because of regulations like the GDPR. So there's a lot of solution emerging to solve specific issues related to the legal aspect of it. What I like to look at, of course, those are important, but I think things that are maybe more challenging or more ambitious, like one of the startup that I'm involved with is called Cabin in New York. Um, they are working on zero party data, but with a slight difference to the definition that Forrester gave a few years ago, like 3 years ago. When Forrester defined zero party data, they created the term. They said it's data that is willingly given by the consumer to a brand. but they forgot the most important aspect. Who has control over this data? So to me, if even if I'm willingly giving you my email address and so on, but then the brand runs away with it and I don't have any control, it's still first party data to me. Zero party data to me, what it means is as the customer, I keep total control over what I want to share with which brands, for which purpose, for how long, and so on. But it's a huge challenge because that's not how the internet and the web evolved over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And switching this back to giving the power to the customer is probably the biggest change that can happen because it means that you need to have authentication to know, is this the real person, right? You need authentication, you need security, you need control, you need transparency. But in such a scenario, if I'm the customer and I'm saying, oh yes, I like this brand, and they're asked politely and giving me the right value proposition, I'm willing to give them my email, my name, my address, my phone, my date of birth, gender, and all kinds of interests because I trust the brand, but I
Yeah.
still retain the control. So if one day I decide that I don't want to do business with them anymore, I can pull that out and say, I'm sorry, but I, for whatever reason, I don't want to be a customer of your brand anymore.
It's a breakup.
It's a breakup. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to building trust. And imagine the value for the brand. Imagine the value of this data. You know the person who willingly gave it to you. They have absolutely no reason to put crap in there because they know they retain the control over it. So the value of the data is going to be much, much, much better than trying to force people, because what we hear is, oh, you need to collect more first party data. So let's find all kinds of ways to collect more of it.
Race to the bottom.
Exactly. Doing contests or whatnot just in order to get some crappy data. Right?
Yeah, it goes back to measuring the wrong thing, right? Like we're so fixated with numbers. We want a big number to show that we're doing our job, but the reality is trust cannot really be encapsulated with a number. And if you can, it's not by driving that number up that you increase trust. It's like the causal chain goes the other way. You first build trust and then numbers go up, not the other way.
Yeah.
So with zero-party data, basically, is the idea is that we are in complete control of our personal information. But from a technical standpoint, what does that mean? And is it another tool? Do we create our identity in one central database, federated, that ticks all the boxes, and then sort of link that up?
Yeah, there's a couple of important points. One is the authentication aspects. When you go to a website, typically you either provide your email and a password, or you authenticate with one of the big players like LinkedIn or Microsoft or Google or Twitter or Facebook and so on, right? Why does it have to be that way? What if the authentication mechanism was a trusted, just like an escrow, for example, where their mission is really to protect your authentication mechanism, right? And then if you use something like 1Password or something like that, we know that there are ways to have secure data that sits on your device that is encrypted and secure while also being synchronized somewhere in the cloud that is also secured, and they don't even have the password. They have simply no means. It's impossible to decrypt what is there. So what is it, let's say to use the cabin terminology, they call it the vault. So you have your own vault, a bit like a bank. You have the control, you decide, you have the key to it, and you decide what you want to share. But it needs to be done in a way that is transparent enough so that there's no difficulty, no challenges in using it on your phone, on your desktop, or something like that. But
frictionless as well,
frictionless, user friendly. And then yes, you can put all the nice keychain and a blockchain and so on in there to make sure that it's secured and you follow the data so that it doesn't get replicated and doesn't get reused in a context that you don't agree to.
I love that. In the conversation with Doug Laney on Infonomics, we talked about the non-depletable aspect of the asset,
Hmm.
being digital assets. The fact that
Hmm.
we can make copies of pictures, we can make copies of data sets,
Yeah,
and nobody, unless we take the necessary precautions, nobody can tell whether,
yeah.
it's A or
But
B,
that's
which one
why
is the original.
blockchain, NFTs, that I think there's a more interesting way to think about NFTs than simply having an exclusive picture that you're the only one in the world who has the right to it, right? What if NFTs was attached to the data that you share so that it cannot be replicated or cannot be used in another context that you didn't agree to? So I think that becomes it's a big challenge. And of course, Caden is not the only one looking into it, but it's exciting. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think I've been excited like that since I've started working 35 years ago. You asked about what businesses can do in order to embrace maybe a more ethical approach to it. When you go to a website and there's those famous consent pop-ups, I don't know if people realize that when you say reject all, they can still track you. Legally, they can still track you. Why is that? Because they track you without cookies. They track
Mm.
you without any personal information. So essentially, what again, it's the message. The message is for the customer. You come to a website and you get asked, "Do you agree to use cookies?" What you say is, "No, I don't want you to use cookies to track me."
But you
But
haven't
what
said
if I
no.
track you without cookies? Oh, that's fine. So it's a lie. It's the worst thing. And when you, in terms of user experience, when you think about consent pop-ups, it's the worst thing ever.
Right.
Consent pop-ups are just it's such a bad user experience. And on top of that, most of the time, they're when I do audits of websites to check if the consent pop-up is actually correctly implemented from a technical standpoint,
Yeah.
almost all the time I find some cookies that shouldn't be set or some tags that are firing before consent or things like that. So, and I even saw a website where more than once where there's a nice consent dialogue, but regardless of what you do, exactly the same thing happens. Whether you say yes or no, they will still track you. They don't, yeah, like on the surface, it's like, oh yeah, we care about your
The
privacy.
illusion of agency.
It's the illusion. Again, it's totally fake. Is it customer centric? Is it building trust? Is it good marketing? Absolutely not. And it's not legal on top of that.
Yeah, and we'll go back on square one, right? Like ethics
Hmm.
pays in the long term. Nobody gets a bonus because they use data ethically
Hmm.
tomorrow,
Hmm.
but the organization, the brand as a whole, the way the brand is perceived,
Yeah.
can enormously be impacted by those micro decisions we take every day. Which kind of like I want to dive into that because imagine that now we're looking at a company that has a marketing function, and now the business understands the importance of this long term. They're not in the game of exploiting their relationships that make up
Hmm.
their business. They want to
Hmm.
protect them, they want to nurture them, and eventually convert them when and if that conversion is supposed to happen without
Yeah.
forcing anyone to do anything. So if that's the vibe in the organization, and we're looking at the marketing function, what do we need as data leaders? What kind of initiatives can we take to ensure that people across the organization understand the impact?
There are some well-established financial practice. It's governed by the law in each different state. And you cannot, there are certain things in accounting, for example, that you can simply not do, right? Because if you do it, eventually in the short term or the long term, eventually it's going to get known, it's going to be known. And it's going to hurt your business. So people have learned through education, through a slap on the, on the wrist, that there are some certain things that shouldn't be done. Why would it be different in marketing? We're going to learn over time what is acceptable or not. And you know, one of the story I like to tell is when I speak at conferences, I ask the audience who would like to work with 30 or 50 million customer records, detailed with all kinds of attributes. Of course, everybody, yeah, super exciting. Who wouldn't want to use this data to create a super wonderful campaign for selling shoes? Of course, marketers will say, "Oh yes, that would be awesome. You know, that's a nice playground." And for data scientists, it's like, "Oh
Ooh,
yeah, bring it on. I want
yeah.
it. I want the data. It's a nice playground. I will cut my teeth on creating awesome models and so on." And then you realize that it actually works, and you can sell more shoes to a certain audience and so on. Well, who would say no to that? Well, let me tell you a slightly different way of seeing it. Cambridge Analytica, they had smart people, right? They had smart data scientists who were able to create awesome models, and they did marketing, and it was super efficient, and it was well targeted, and it was successful and everything. It's just that instead of selling shoes, they were selling an election, and who wouldn't want to do that, right? That's the way it works. So what was the real problem with Cambridge Analytica? Is it how they got the data? Well, they cheated a little bit here and there, but it was not illegal at the time. Is it because they had smart data scientists? No, absolutely not. Like who wouldn't want to have a team of data scientists with the right expertise? They had the right amount of data, they did marketing campaigns, it worked. So what was the problem? The problem is people found out about it. Propaganda is not an issue until people realize that they were the victim of propaganda.
Mm.
So what is the where is the tipping point between doing marketing and doing manipulation, deceit, and propaganda? That limit, that's the ethical question, is where's the limit? Where How far can I go and be justified and perfectly legitimate to do it from a marketing standpoint? Because obviously nobody wakes up in the morning and say, "Oh, I'm gonna really exploit people." Nobody does that in marketing. When it's always, we think that we're doing something that is okay, that is the right thing to do. Somebody told me recently, I wrote about an experience I had with a very small agency that has a questionable marketing tactic. And I decided to give the name of that small business, which, it's questionable doing that. But I give the name of, when I see something good, I give the name, and when I see something bad, I will, give the name also. And the thing is, if you, as a marketer, I think the easiest ethical question is, if somebody finds out about your marketing tactics and talked about it publicly, are you going to be ashamed of it? If the answer is yes, don't do it, right? If you're ashamed of your marketing tactics going public, it's not a good marketing tactic. If you purchase email lists to spam people and it gets in the front page of the news,
Mm.
it's not a good marketing tactic, right? So when you see it that way, and the other easy ethical one is, imagine when you do something, imagine your mother is just behind your shoulder and watching what you're doing.
I love that.
If she understood, would she agree that oh yeah, you're a good boy?
So
If
proud of
not,
you.
yeah, she's proud of me. But if not, then obviously it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. So And I've heard arguments of the type, well, but everybody is doing what we're doing, right?
Yes.
And it's very easy to just fall
Yeah.
into that trap. I
Mm.
mean, sure, human behavior is very complicated, and there's a large range of things.
Mm.
People kill, people, do charity for their lives. The distribution, the
Mm-hmm.
tails of that bell curve are pretty long. So surely, if you look hard enough, you'll find anyone that does anything.
Mm-hmm.
So you can justify it that way, or you can take
Yeah.
responsibility, which is all what data leaders should do.
Yeah.
What can I do as a data leader to
Yeah.
improve
And
that?
the objections we hear most of the time is everybody's doing it. They already know everything, and the they is like, I don't know, some spirit somewhere that knows everything. It's God. Or I have nothing to hide. From a customer standpoint, I hear that very often. Oh, I have nothing to hide. And I did
Hmm.
it a few days ago. Someone who said, I have nothing to hide. It took me 20 minutes. And I sent him a personal message saying, well, you live at this address. Here's a picture of your house. I know you live with that person.
You
And
did not.
all of that
Wow.
information was public. So do you still think that you have nothing to hide? It gets pretty scary. And all of that was done in a matter of less than 20 minutes using just publicly available information.
That's nuts.
One analogy that I find pretty interesting, it's a little bit crude, but privacy is when you go to the bathroom, everyone knows what you're doing, but you still close the door.
Hmm.
It's not true that you don't have anything to hide. You always have something to hide. So, you know, it's impossible that everything can be disclosed publicly for whoever. And the worst is obviously like people harvesting this data and making money out of it without your knowledge, without your control, without your consent. That's probably the worst thing that can happen. So yes, competitors might be doing it. They might be doing falsifying their revenues and playing on their financials and stuff like that. They might be doing that too. Does it mean that you're going to do it? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had more faith in goodwill and good
Yeah,
intentions and of
I
people
agree.
to just expect that with the right education, the problem can be mitigated. I am
Mm,
absolutely sure that literacy is a critical piece of the puzzle, because if you
mhm,
don't even know what you're doing, how can you expect to even ask the question?
mm,
Everything starts from a doubt. When you're doubting what you're doing, that's the
mhm.
beginning of transformation, of change. So
Yes.
we need that, but we also need incentives. So when the ethics rubber hits the road, that
Mhm.
point of contact to me is incredibly interesting from a psychological standpoint, from a legal
Yes.
standpoint, from a trust and branding and marketing angle. We've got to have the right incentives, right? We need to create a structure where people not they yes, they say this is not the right thing to do. My mom would not be proud of me,
Mhm.
but they also know in a tangible, concrete way that if they keep doing what they're doing, it's going to get bad, and it's going to again can only
Yeah.
get worse. And
Mhm.
so use
Yeah.
those arguments to go and educate, perhaps even their line of report, and saying, hey, you asked me to do this. We've got two options here. We can go one way, and these are the consequences, short term and long term, or we can go the other way, and this is the scenario. Instead of even just painting that scenario,
Mhm.
could increase dramatically the probability that someone then
Yeah.
takes action.
Yeah.
But how
And
do we do
you
that?
know what? The
Yeah.
interesting thing also is that education and literacy and those aspects are super important. But then there was an article of essentially saying the article was essentially saying people are too dumb or stupid or irresponsible to manage their own data, so don't make it available to them. And I was like, what a stupid thing to say. But the interesting thing is you don't actually need to do that for 100% of the people. If there are a sufficiently large amount of people who are educated and know how important it is, And they force the brands gradually to embrace more of a customer centric and data responsibility culture. It will benefit 100% of the people, even those who don't care about it, even those who say, I don't have anything to hide, they know everything anyway. If there's enough people who care about that, it's going to benefit everyone, including the brands in the maybe a bit of a longer run, but it will be beneficial to everyone. So I think we're living a very interesting time. Of course, not everybody agrees that having more of an ethical approach to it is worth it. Maybe they're right, uh, but we've seen that it takes a long time to change corporate culture and to
Mhm.
educate people about the importance of data privacy and security and protection and so on.
This is actually perhaps one of the cases where I would say technology can actually make the whole process a lot smoother and faster. And I know I am a big I'm a bit critical of the technology, the tech religion. The people
Mm-hmm.
that expect that just with the right tool everything magically fixes all the
Yeah.
shortcomings of our human nature. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But it's so true that with the right technology, we can change our habits in a more systematic way, at least track our progress. It's about
Mm-hmm.
re-educating. When you dive inside the data team, it gets more complicated because you have historical data and
Mm-hmm.
your responsibility is to decide what do you want to do with those. Do you want to anonymize it? Who's going to consume it? And the closer you are to the source, the higher the responsibility
Yep.
because the tree kind of branches out.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at a master data set in master data management, that by definition is going to be 10% of the data used by pretty much every single process and person within the enterprise.
Yep.
And so what you do there, you're looking at an address, you want to anonymize it, great, but how do you do it?
Yep.
How can you reverse it? Can you track who's using it?
And you know what?
Um,
Sometimes it's very simple things like throughout the years when I coached agencies and worked with clients on digital analytics and so on, sometimes they were giving me full admin access when I didn't need it. We see with the advent of the GDPR, we see that quickly people understood that no, you don't do that. No, you don't give admin to anyone who asks it, or don't ask it. No, you don't. You don't send customer records with all the personal information left and right to a bunch of people through email. Uh, those are simple things that anyone with a can easily understand that. So I
yeah.
think we're going to get there. It doesn't have to be super complex. It's just elevating the bar so that we're more aware of the value of the data we have and the risks that comes with it. And I
Yeah,
think
especially.
it's going to be better.
Yeah. I'm a relentless optimist too, and I just think that this is something we really need to focus on. It's going to be an interesting one for sure
Oh
to
yes,
crack.
yeah. I think we're going to be busy in the coming years. That's for sure.
In terms of data communities and like sources or let's say websites or communities,
Hmm.
places where someone that resonates with the things we talked about today can go and learn more
Yeah.
and become the agent of change within the
Hmm.
organization.
I think
What?
that's a good question because again, we're at the intersection of marketing, IT, and legal. So overlapping those three aspects is pretty difficult. But I think one starting point might be the IAPP. That from a legal perspective, they cover a vast array of information. So IAPP is a it's the International Association of Privacy Professional. So they have training, they have conferences and articles and all kind of stuff. So that's a really good starting point. And then it goes in different directions. There are some people who are looking at um, one is called one that I like a lot, the wired wig. it's funny because it was started by Annabelle Pemberton. She's a lawyer, and she gets the technology. So she provides the overlap between the two. So she has interesting conversations about the
Interesting.
overlap of the legal aspects and the technical aspects. So that's a good one also. And then maybe you can share that with your audience. There
Absolutely.
was
Yeah.
a nice list, a Twitter list with uh, a bunch of interesting places to follow. There's a lot of them, but maybe not so much. There's a lot of them talking about the legal aspects. When you
Hmm.
talk about IT, oftentimes it goes into security aspects of it,
Yeah.
and then from a marketing standpoint. So that's that overlap. There's not that many people talking about it. I think not enough.
Cool. Stefan, I want to, now that we are tailing slowly approaching the end of our hour, I wanted to ask you two broad questions. The
Mm-hmm.
first one is, what would you like to see more of in the industry? And the second, what would you like to see less of?
Yeah, I think. Well, I can probably answer both of those questions in using a term that I've started to use that simplifies everything. I use the hashtag no consent, no tracking, especially in the marketing aspects and digital analytics aspect, to mean that before you implement something to collect data, think about the transparency, consent, and control. Just start with that instead of rushing to install the nicest shiny object that just came out. Right? Just take a step back and think about it. So I think this, if we think about that, we're going to see more marketers raising the flag when they feel that something might be wrong and go beyond just the legal compliance. And we're going to see less instance of behavior, marketing behavior that is questionable or maybe not aligned with our own personal values. So I think that that could play on both sides of things.
Setting the intention. I love that. I
Yes.
absolutely love that.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps before we close, I just came up with, I remember that recently with Debbie Botha, we talked about privacy, and she mentioned, I didn't do any extended research on the topic, but I'm wondering, not everybody understands this in the same way. Thankfully, we need diversity
Mm-hmm.
of thoughts. But some people kind of lost any hopes that this can indeed be solved, the problem
Mm-hmm.
of control and transparency. Some others demand that, like you and me having this conversation. In your experience, what's the demographic looks like? Who are the people that are more receptive to these concepts?
It's a super wide spectrum, ranging from those we said, don't care about it, don't have anything to hide, they know everything. So it's like, okay, game over, it's the end of the world, we cannot do anything about it. And then there's the other, I would say, the other extreme, which is, oh, but as soon as you go to a website that use any third party resource, you need to have consent. Or as soon, in fact, because a web page is, there's a cached version of the web page on your site, so it's storing data on your device, then it should ask for consent. I think it doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, you won't be able to surf the web and benefit from all the good things there are on the web if there are too many roadblocks for the casual user to use it. So I hope that I'm somewhere in between, that I care enough, but without going to the extremes. And we need more people who will see it in maybe slightly different ways, but we need more people to just have a conversation and discuss about it. Um, so yeah, I think it's going to continue to evolve quickly. I think in a year and 2 years from now, it's going to be very different. You probably heard about in Europe that Google Analytics would be illegal, quote unquote. because it's sending IP addresses to the US, and the US doesn't offer the same protection that European have. But beyond that simple statement, and of course, there are big discussions way above our heads about that. But when you think of it, it's the foundation of the internet. Being able to have two devices that can communicate one to another using an IP address, they have to exchange that IP address. There's no way around it. That's how it works. So saying, "Oh no, you can't do that," it's like, okay, let's close everything and don't ever go on the internet and stop using all of the technology that we have today, because that's how it works.
So we don't really have an option. We either fix it or we stick with the status quo and let anyone do whatever they want with their data, which is not a good future.
No, exactly.
So let's go off and fix it.
It's better to fix it and improve it and understand it also.
Yeah. So first step for our listeners is definitely to follow you. I think, are you active on Twitter as well as LinkedIn?
A little bit on Twitter, but mostly on LinkedIn. But when I publish something, usually I echo it on Twitter also, and throughout all the channels.
Nice.
I'm active on Medium also, but the easiest way is just to look me up on LinkedIn.
It's definitely worthwhile visiting Stéphane Hamel page and hit that bell if you want to keep learning about these topics. That's for sure. Stéphane, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I have a feeling that we're going to do so many more things together in the future.
Thanks to you.
Cheers. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this episode. I hope this means you found the content useful and relevant. There is a lot happening right now over at Discovering Data. We're working on a new series of live events, more amazing guests, and we're starting to plant the seeds for a future conference. If you want to stay in the know, you have options. Hop on discoveringdata.com and subscribe to our list, or share your knowledge and make new friends by joining our circle. And that's all I've got for now. A big ciao from Sydney, Australia, and I'll see you in the next episode of Discovering Data.